The afternoon sun slants through the dust-filled air of Madrid's National Historical Archives, where ancient documents sleep in their acid-free tombs, guarding secrets that have remained untold for nearly a century. Among the countless photographs and papers from the Spanish Civil War, one image has recently captured the attention of military historian Dr. Carlos Mendoza. A seemingly unremarkable black and white photograph measuring just 8 by 10 inches, showing 23 soldiers standing at attention after the Republican victory in Belchite in October 1937. This channel is not for everyone, but for those fascinated by how the smallest details from our past can completely rewrite history. What Dr. Mendoza discovered in this image would challenge everything historians thought they knew about loyalty, sacrifice, and the true heroes of Spain's bloodiest conflict. The photograph sits on Dr. Mendoza's desk under the harsh light of a specialized lamp. At first glance, it appears ordinary, just another military memento from a brutal war. The soldiers stand in 3 rows, their faces solemn, their uniforms dusty from battle. But something about the image had always troubled Dr. Mendoza. Something almost imperceptible in the far left corner of the frame. A detail so small it had been overlooked for decades, until modern technology allowed it to emerge from the shadows of history. Dr. Ana Ferreira, an expert in wartime cryptography and Dr. Mendoza's colleague, leans forward, adjusting her glasses. "I still cannot believe we almost missed it," she whispers, her voice carrying the weight of their discovery. The digital scan of the photograph is displayed on the monitor beside them, enhanced and enlarged to reveal what normal eyes had failed to see for 86 years. A single soldier, barely 20 years old according to military records, with his hand raised in what initially appeared to be an awkward gesture. But Dr. Ferreira recognized it immediately as something far more significant, a covert signal used by undercover agents during the war, hidden in plain sight for nearly a century. The modern story of this photograph begins in the spring of 2023, when Dr. Mendoza was researching Republican military units for his new book on forgotten battles of the Spanish Civil War. The conflict that tore Spain apart between 1936 and 1939 left deep wounds that have never fully healed. The war pitted the left-leaning Republicans, loyal to the democratically elected government, against the nationalists, led by General Francisco Franco, who eventually established a dictatorship that lasted until his passing from this life in 1975. "What state are you listening from, Doctor?" Mendoza often asks during his university lectures, explaining how the Spanish Civil War resonated globally, drawing international volunteers who saw the conflict as the first real battle against the rising tide of fascism in Europe. "It was never just a Spanish war," he explains to his students. "It was a prelude to the greater conflict that would engulf the world just years later. The battle for Belchite in 1937 was particularly brutal. The small town in the Zaragoza province had been captured by nationalist forces early in the war. The Republicans launched an offensive in August 1937 to reclaim it, and after intense fighting that reduced much of the town to rubble, they succeeded." The photograph in question was taken shortly after this victory, on October 3, 1937, showing members of the 43rd Mixed Brigade, a unit composed primarily of local militiamen and international volunteers. Dr. Mendoza requested access to military records concerning the 43rd Mixed Brigade, expecting to find the usual reports of casualties, supplies, and tactical assessments. What he found instead was a disturbing anomaly. According to official records, all 23 men in the photograph perished just 7 days later in an ambush near the village of Fuendetodos, approximately 44 kilometers from Belchite. The entire unit was reported to have been wiped out in a surprise attack by nationalist forces, but when Dr. Mendoza cross-referenced this information with other military archives, he found contradictory reports about the incident. The first red flag was the discrepancy in the casualty reports, Dr. Mendoza explains, spreading out photocopies of the original documents on his desk. One report listed 23 fatalities, matching the number of soldiers in the photograph. Another mentioned only 21 bodies recovered. A third document, a letter from the brigade commander to headquarters, referenced the unfortunate incident resulting in the loss of 22 brave fighters. These inconsistencies might seem minor, but to a historian like Dr. Mendoza, they signaled something potentially significant. The discovery prompted Dr. Mendoza to dig deeper. He requested access to personal records of the soldiers, many of which had been sealed or classified until recently. The Spanish government's historical memory law of 2007 had opened many previously restricted archives, allowing researchers to access documents that had been hidden for decades. Through these records, Dr. Mendoza began piecing together the identities of the men in the photograph. The process was painstaking. Many records had been damaged, lost, or deliberately destroyed during the Franco regime. Names had to be cross-referenced with multiple sources, and photographs of individual soldiers were rare. It was like trying to complete a puzzle with most of the pieces missing, Dr. Mendoza recalls. But slowly, the faces in the photograph began to acquire names, histories, and stories. The breakthrough came when Dr. Mendoza identified the young soldier on the far left, the one with the slightly raised hand. His name was Miguel Aguirre Soto, 19 years old, from a small village near Valencia. According to his military file, he had joined the Republican forces in 1936, shortly after the outbreak of the war. Before we continue with this disturbing tale, it is worth noting that Miguel had an unusual background. Unlike many of his comrades who were farmers, factory workers, or students, Miguel had worked as a telegraph operator before the war. This detail would prove crucial to understanding what happened. When Dr. Mendoza shared his findings with Dr. Ferreira, she immediately recognized the significance of Miguel's pre-war occupation. Telegraph operators were prime recruitment targets for intelligence operations, she explains. They already understood codes and had experience with secure communications. This led them to explore a new possibility. What if Miguel was not just a regular soldier, but an intelligence operative embedded within the unit? Dr. Ferreira, whose expertise lies in wartime codes and clandestine communications, began researching known covert signals used by Republican intelligence. The Republican side had established the Servicio de Investigación Militar, or SIM, in August 1937, just weeks before the photograph was taken. The SIM employed various methods for agents to identify themselves to each other or to send warnings without arousing suspicion. The position of Miguel's hand in the photograph matches exactly with one of the recognition signals used by SIM agents, Dr. Ferreira explains, showing a declassified training manual for Republican intelligence operatives. The manual, only recently made available to researchers, contains illustrations of various hand positions and gestures, each with a specific meaning. The particular gesture made by Miguel, with the right hand raised slightly at waist level, with the thumb and little finger extended while the other fingers are curled, was a signal indicating imminent danger or betrayal. The implications were enormous. If Miguel was indeed making this signal, it suggested he was aware of some threat to the unit. But what danger could he have known about? And why would he risk exposing himself by making such a gesture in an official photograph? To answer these questions, Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Ferreira expanded their investigation. They needed to understand the exact circumstances of the ambush that reportedly killed the entire unit just days after the photograph was taken. The official narrative was that nationalist scouts had discovered the unit's position and launched a surprise attack. But if Miguel was signaling danger, it suggested a different scenario, possibly involving betrayal from within. We focused on locating any survivors or witnesses, Dr. Mendoza explains. The discrepancies in the casualty reports suggested that not everyone in the unit might have perished in the ambush. This led them to search for records of Republican soldiers who had been transferred from the 43rd Mixed Brigade shortly before the incident, or who might have been listed as missing rather than confirmed fatalities. Their persistence paid off when they discovered a hospital record from October 12, 1937, 2 days after the ambush, mentioning a wounded soldier brought in by local farmers. The soldier, severely injured and unconscious, carried no identification. He was described only as male, approximately 20 years of age, with a gunshot wound to the right shoulder and multiple lacerations. The report noted that the soldier was wearing civilian clothes when found, but mud on his boots matched the terrain around Fuendetodos, where the ambush had taken place. Could this unidentified soldier have been one of the men from the photograph? The hospital records indicated that the young man never regained consciousness and passed from this life 3 days later from infection. He was buried in an unmarked grave in the local cemetery. With no way to confirm the identity of this mystery soldier, Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Ferreira turned their attention back to Miguel Aguirre Soto and his background. Military records showed that Miguel had been recruited into the SIM in September 1937, just weeks before the photograph was taken. His handler was listed as a Captain Ramon Mercader, a name that immediately caught Dr. Ferreira's attention. Ramon Mercader is a name that appears in multiple intelligence operations during this period, she explains. But it was almost certainly a code name used by different handlers, rather than a single individual. The connection to the SIM opened new avenues for research. The intelligence service had maintained its own records, separate from regular military documentation. Much of this material had been destroyed during the final days of the war, when Republican forces realized their defeat was imminent. But some documents had survived, smuggled out by agents fleeing to France, or hidden by sympathizers who hoped they might someday serve as evidence of the truth. Through connections with historical societies and private collectors, Dr. Mendoza gained access to a partial archive of SIM communications from the Aragon Front in late 1937. Among these documents was a decoded message dated October 2, 1937, just one day before the photograph was taken. The message was brief but chilling. Unit compromised, extraction impossible, maintain cover, await further instructions. The message bore no signature or recipient information, but the timing and location matched perfectly with Miguel's unit. This suggested that the SIM was aware of some threat to the unit, but for whatever reason, they could not extract their agent, Miguel. Dr. Mendoza explains. He was effectively being told to maintain his cover and wait, despite the danger. But what was the nature of the threat? What had Miguel discovered that was so significant? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Ferreira, continuing her research into covert communications, discovered a series of seemingly innocent letters sent between October 1937 and January 1938. The letters, from a woman named Elena to her brother Antonio, contained hidden messages using a substitution cipher popular among Republican operatives. When decoded, the letters revealed fragments of a larger story, Dr. Ferreira explains. Elena was actually a SIM handler, and Antonio was a code name for a network of agents. The letters contained reports about nationalist movements, supply lines, and, most significantly, references to a double agent within Republican Forces code named Aguila or Eagle. One letter, dated September 29, 1937, contained a passage that, when decoded, read, "Aguila confirms operation scheduled for second week of October. Target is 43rd Brigade. Complete elimination planned. Source in High Command has approved." This was the smoking gun. It suggested that the ambush that killed Miguel's unit was not a chance encounter, but a carefully planned operation, facilitated by a double agent within the Republican High Command. And Miguel, through his position as a SIM operative, had somehow learned of this betrayal. He must have been gathering intelligence on nationalist movements when he intercepted communications about the planned ambush, Dr. Mendoza theorizes. But he couldn't warn his comrades directly without exposing himself as a SIM agent, which would have compromised the entire intelligence network. The gesture in the photograph now made perfect sense. It was Miguel's desperate attempt to signal to his handlers that he had critical information without alerting the traitors who might be watching. But why didn't the SIM act on this warning? Why wasn't the unit moved or the mission canceled? Further research into the SIM archives revealed a disturbing possibility. A report dated October 5, 1937, 2 days after the photograph and 5 days before the ambush, mentioned communication difficulties with Agent Paloma, which was Miguel's code name. The report continued, "Suspect compromise of channel, implementing alternate protocol." It appears that Miguel tried to warn his handlers about the impending ambush, but his communications were either intercepted or blocked, Dr. Ferreira explains. The SIM knew something was wrong but couldn't establish direct contact with their agent. The investigation took a darker turn when Dr. Mendoza discovered a personal diary belonging to Captain Diego Valverde, the commander of the 43rd Mixed Brigade. The diary, preserved by Valverde's family and only recently donated to the archives, contained entries from September and October 1937. Most were routine observations about supplies, morale, and tactical considerations. But the entry for October 8th, 2 days before the ambush, stood out. "Something is not right with the new orders," Valverde wrote. "The route takes us through exposed terrain, and the timing means we would arrive at Fuente Todos after dark. I have requested clarification from headquarters but received only confirmation that the orders stand. Young Aguirre seems particularly agitated today. I caught him attempting to use the radio without authorization. When questioned, he claimed he was trying to contact his family. I have assigned him extra duties as punishment." This entry suggested that Miguel had indeed tried to warn someone about the danger, possibly attempting to bypass his compromised SIM channels by using the unit's regular communication equipment. Captain Valverde, unaware of Miguel's true role, had interpreted this as a breach of protocol and prevented him from sending his message. The final piece of the puzzle came from the most unexpected source. In 2022, a renovation of an old farmhouse near Fuente Todos uncovered a metal box hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated October 9, 1937, the day before the ambush. The letter was signed simply M and addressed to the Archives of Truth. "I write this knowing I may not survive to tell the truth myself," the letter began. "By tomorrow, the 43rd Brigade will be led into a trap near Fuente Todos. I have learned that Major Felipe Sanchez, who issued our marching orders, is the double agent known as Aguila. He has coordinated with nationalist forces to ambush our unit at the ravine north of the village. I have tried to warn headquarters, but I believe my communications are being monitored. I have also tried to alert Captain Valverde, but he does not trust me, especially after catching me with the radio." The letter continued, detailing the planned ambush and naming several other individuals involved in the conspiracy. It concluded with a passage that sent chills down Dr. Mendoza's spine when he first read it. "If you are reading this, know that I, Miguel Aguirre Soto, tried to save my comrades. If we have perished, let history record that we were betrayed by those we trusted, not defeated by those we fought. And let the truth, long buried, finally see the light of day." The letter, authenticated by handwriting analysis and historical context, provided the final confirmation of what Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Ferreira had pieced together. Miguel had discovered a plot to ambush his unit, orchestrated by a high-ranking traitor within the Republican forces. Unable to warn his comrades or his handlers directly, he had made a desperate gesture in the photograph, hidden a letter that might someday be found, and then marched with his unit toward the trap, knowing what awaited them. What makes this story so remarkable is not just the betrayal, but Miguel's extraordinary courage, Dr. Mendoza reflects. He could have deserted, saved himself. Instead, he stayed with his comrades, hoping against hope that his warnings would somehow get through, or that he might find a way to save them at the last moment. The ambush, as reconstructed from military records and Miguel's letter, was brutally efficient. The 43rd Brigade, following orders from the traitor Major Sanchez, had entered a narrow ravine near Fuente Todos at dusk on October 10, 1937. Nationalist forces, forewarned and prepared, had positioned machine guns at both ends of the ravine. When the Republicans were fully exposed with no cover, they opened fire. Captain Valverde's body was found at the front of the column, suggesting he died in the initial barrage. Most of the other soldiers were found clustered together, indicating they had little time to disperse or seek cover. According to the recovery team's report, many bodies showed evidence of close-range fatal wounds, suggesting nationalist troops had moved through the ravine after the initial attack, ensuring there were no survivors. But what of Miguel? His body was never explicitly identified in the reports. Could he have been the unidentified wounded soldier who died in the hospital days later? Or did he escape, only to fade into the shadows of history? The evidence is inconclusive, but Dr. Mendoza leans toward the hospital theory. The age and timing match, and it would explain why he was in civilian clothes. He might have tried to escape after the ambush began, only to be wounded in the attempt. What state are you listening from? Does your local history contain similar stories of betrayal and hidden heroism? Leave a comment with your theory about what happened to Miguel after the ambush. Was he the mysterious patient in the hospital, or did he somehow escape to fight another day? The aftermath of the ambush reveals another layer of this historical tragedy. The traitor, Major Felipe Sanchez, continued to rise through the ranks of the Republican military throughout 1938, suggesting his betrayal went undiscovered. Records indicate he fled to France in early 1939 as Franco's forces closed in on Barcelona, signaling the end of the war. From there, the trail goes cold. Some sources suggest he may have made his way to Argentina, where many Spanish exiles sought refuge, but no confirmed records of his later life have been found. The fact that Sanchez escaped justice is perhaps the most bitter aspect of this story. Dr. Ferreira says, "While Miguel and his comrades paid the ultimate price, the architect of their destruction lived on, possibly even prospering in exile. The investigation into the fate of the 43rd Brigade reveals a broader pattern of infiltration and betrayal that plagued the Republican side throughout the war. The SIM, while effective in many operations, was itself compromised multiple times, with agents and networks exposed to nationalist forces. The resulting lack of trust and communication breakdowns contributed significantly to Republican defeats. In the decades following Franco's victory, the history of the Spanish Civil War was carefully controlled and manipulated. The stories of Republican heroes were suppressed, while nationalist narratives dominated public discourse. It was only after the transition to democracy following Franco's passing from this life in 1975 that researchers could begin the slow process of uncovering the truth. This photograph, with its subtle gesture of warning, is a perfect metaphor for how history sometimes communicates with us, Dr. Mendoza reflects. The truth is often visible, but only to those who know how to look for it, who have the patience and knowledge to recognize its signals. The digital enhancement of the photograph has revealed other details previously obscured by time and the limitations of the original image. The expressions on the soldiers' faces tell their own story. Most look directly at the camera, their expressions a mixture of pride, exhaustion, and determination. Miguel's face, however, shows a different emotion entirely. There is a tension around his eyes, a tightness to his jaw that suggests a man carrying a terrible burden, the knowledge of impending doom that he could neither fully communicate nor prevent. When I look at his face now, knowing what we know, it breaks my heart, Dr. Ferreira admits. Imagine being 20 years old, carrying such knowledge, and being unable to save your friends. The psychological weight must have been unbearable. Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Ferreira have spent the past year compiling their research into a comprehensive report on the 43rd Brigade and the betrayal that led to their destruction. Their work has attracted attention from historians around the world, as well as from descendants of the soldiers in the photograph. Through genealogical research and public appeals, they have managed to identify and contact families of 18 of the 23 men. Maria Valverde, the granddaughter of Captain Diego Valverde, was particularly moved by the discoveries. "All my life, I knew my grandfather died in the war, but I never knew the circumstances," she explains during an interview in her Madrid apartment. To learn that he was betrayed by his own side, but also to discover the heroism of young Miguel, who tried to warn them, it changes everything. It gives their sacrifices new meaning. The descendants of the soldiers have formed a memorial association dedicated to preserving the memory of the 43rd Brigade and educating the public about their story. They have successfully petitioned the local government of Fuendetodos to erect a monument at the site of the ambush, honoring the fallen soldiers and specifically recognizing Miguel Aguirre Soto's attempt to save his comrades. The quest to find Miguel's own descendants has proven more challenging. Military records indicate he was unmarried and had no children. His parents had passed from this life before the war, and he had only one sister, who appears to have died in the bombing of Valencia in 1938. But the researchers remain hopeful that distant relatives might still be found, people who deserve to know about their family members' extraordinary courage. This channel is not for everyone, but for those who understand that history is not just a collection of dates and facts, but a living, breathing narrative that continues to unfold as we discover new evidence and perspectives. The story of Miguel Aguirre Soto and the 43rd Brigade reminds us that heroism often goes unrecognized, that truth can remain hidden for decades, and that a single gesture, captured in a photograph and preserved through time, can eventually reveal its meaning to those patient enough to look. The implications of Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Ferreira's research extend beyond this specific incident. Their methodology, combining traditional archival research with modern technology and interdisciplinary collaboration, has established a new standard for investigating historical events obscured by time, politics, and deliberate suppression. We hope our work inspires other researchers to look more closely at the photographic record of the Spanish Civil War, Dr. Mendoza explains. There are thousands of images in archives around the world, many of which have never been properly analyzed or contextualized. Each one potentially contains similar stories waiting to be discovered. The investigation has also highlighted the role of civilian courage during the conflict. The anonymous farmer who found the wounded soldier and brought him to the hospital, the medical staff who treated him despite the danger of being associated with Republican forces, and whoever hid Miguel's letter beneath the floorboards, all demonstrated extraordinary bravery in the face of potential retribution. The letter itself has become a powerful artifact, now preserved in the National Historical Archives, alongside the photograph that started this investigation. Its discovery was a reminder of how history sometimes preserves its truths in unexpected ways, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. In June 2023, Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Ferreira organized a memorial ceremony at the site of the ambush near Fuendetodos. Descendants of the soldiers, local officials, and fellow historians gathered to unveil a simple stone monument bearing the names of all 23 men of the 43rd Brigade. Miguel's name appears at the top, followed by an inscription that reads, "He tried to warn them. Now, at last, we have heard him." The ceremony included readings from Miguel's letter and from the personal diaries and letters of other soldiers in the unit. Through these intimate documents, the men in the photograph were transformed from anonymous historical figures into individuals with hopes, fears, and dreams cut short by betrayal and war. Teresa Aguirre, an elderly woman claiming to be the granddaughter of Miguel's cousin, attended the ceremony, bringing with her a faded photograph of a young man she believed to be Miguel, taken before the war. The resemblance to the soldier in the military photograph was striking, confirming their identification beyond doubt. "My grandmother always told stories about her brave cousin who died in the war," Teresa explained, tears in her eyes, "but she never knew exactly what happened to him or how he died. Now I can tell her story completely, with the ending she never knew." The impact of this historical discovery extends beyond Spain. The Spanish Civil War drew volunteers and attention from around the world, and its legacy influenced military, political, and intelligence operations in the decades that followed. The methods of infiltration, the use of double agents, and the signals employed by covert operatives all evolved from techniques developed during this conflict. Dr. Ferreira has begun collaboration with international intelligence historians to compare the SIMS methods with those used by other agencies during the same period. The Spanish Civil War was a testing ground for many intelligence techniques that would later be refined during World War II, she explains. Understanding how these methods evolved helps us better comprehend the development of modern espionage. The story of Miguel Aguirre Soto has also resonated with contemporary discussions about whistleblowers and the moral complexity of loyalty. Miguel found himself caught between his duty to his immediate comrades and his mission as an intelligence operative. His attempt to warn his unit, even at the risk of compromising his cover, raises questions about the ethical responsibilities of individuals within military and intelligence structures. Before we continue with this disturbing tale, it is worth noting that Miguel's story has inspired a renewed interest in the personal narratives of the Spanish Civil War among younger generations of Spaniards. Schools have begun incorporating the case study into their history curricula, using it to discuss not only the factual events of the war, but also the ethical dimensions of resistance, loyalty, and truth. Dr. Mendoza has received numerous invitations to speak at universities and historical societies across Europe and the Americas. His presentations always include the enhanced photograph, with Miguel's subtle gesture highlighted for all to see. "Each time I show this image, there is an audible reaction from the audience," he reports. "People instinctively understand the courage it took to make even this small act of resistance, knowing it might not be enough." The research continues to yield new insights as more archives are opened and more families come forward with personal documents and stories. Each new piece of information helps to create a more complete picture of what happened to the 43rd Brigade and the broader context of betrayal and heroism during the war. One particularly moving development occurred in November 2023, when a family in southern France contacted Dr. Mendoza after hearing about his research. They possessed a series of letters written by a Spanish refugee who had settled in their village after the war. The refugee, who identified himself only as El Superviviente, the survivor, claimed to have been part of a Republican unit betrayed by a traitor in 1937. While the letters do not mention the 43rd Brigade specifically, certain details align with what is known about the ambush at Fuendetodos. "I carried the guilt of survival for many years," one letter reads. "Why was I spared when so many better men perished? Now, in my final years, I understand that my purpose was to remember, to ensure their sacrifice was not forgotten." The letter is dated 1978, shortly after Franco's regime ended and democracy returned to Spain. Could this mysterious survivor have been connected to the 43rd Brigade? Perhaps one of the soldiers was separated from the unit before the ambush, or managed to escape during the chaos. The possibility adds yet another layer to an already complex historical narrative. What state are you listening from? Have you ever discovered an unexpected connection to a historical event in your own family history? The past is never as distant as we might think, and its echoes continue to shape our understanding of the present. The digital enhancement techniques used to reveal Miguel's hand signal have been applied to other historical photographs from the Spanish Civil War, with intriguing results. In several cases, researchers have identified similar covert gestures, suggesting a wider network of intelligence operatives embedded within military units. Each discovery adds to our understanding of how the conflict was fought, not just on battlefields, but in the shadows. In April 2024, Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Ferreira published their comprehensive findings in a book titled The Signal Betrayal, Heroism, and the Forgotten Battle of Fuendetodos. The book includes not only their research on Miguel and the 43rd Brigade, but also broader analysis of intelligence operations during the Spanish Civil War. It has been translated into 12 languages, reflecting the international interest in this previously unknown chapter of history. The investigation has also inspired a documentary film, currently in production, which will feature dramatic recreations of the events leading up to the ambush, based on the evidence uncovered by Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Ferreira. The filmmakers have committed to historical accuracy, consulting with the researchers at every stage to ensure the story is told truthfully, while respecting the memory of those who lost their lives. Perhaps the most significant outcome of this research has been the official recognition of Miguel Aguirre Soto's heroism by the Spanish government. In a ceremony held on the anniversary of the ambush, October 10, 2023, Miguel was posthumously awarded the Medal of Civil Valor, Spain's highest civilian decoration for bravery. The medal was accepted by Teresa Aguirre on behalf of the family, a symbolic acknowledgement of a hero who went unrecognized for 86 years. "History has finally heard Miguel's warning," Dr. Mendoza stated at the ceremony. "Though it comes too late to save his comrades, it ensures that their story and his courage will never be forgotten." As the sun sets over the memorial site near Fuendetodos, casting long shadows across the stone monument with its 23 names, visitors often report a profound sense of connection to the past. The ravine where so many young men lost their lives is peaceful now, with wildflowers growing among the rocks where once blood was spilled. But the memory of what happened there, the betrayal and the courage, the warnings unheeded and the truth long buried, continues to resonate. The photograph that started this extraordinary journey of discovery hangs now in the National Historical Archives, properly preserved and prominently displayed. Beside it is a digital enhancement showing Miguel's subtle hand signal, finally visible to all. Beneath both images is a simple caption that tells the story in just a few words. "He tried to warn them. Now we know." In the world of historical research, where victories are measured in fragments of truth recovered from the past, the story of Miguel Aguirre Soto and the 43rd Brigade represents a remarkable achievement. A single photograph, a subtle gesture, and the persistent curiosity of two dedicated historians have combined to rewrite a chapter of history that had been lost to time. It reminds us that the past is never truly settled, that new evidence can emerge to challenge our understanding, and that the quest for historical truth is both endless and essential. As Dr. Ferreira often tells her students, history is not what happened, it is what we can prove happened. Thanks to the evidence uncovered in this investigation, we can now prove that a young soldier named Miguel Aguirre Soto tried to save his comrades from betrayal and death. Though he did not succeed, his courage has finally been recognized, his warning finally heard, across the vast silence of 86 years. This channel is not for everyone, but for those who believe that uncovering the truth about our past helps us better understand our present and shape our future. The story of the photograph from Belchite, with its hidden warning and its tragic aftermath, reminds us that history preserves its secrets in unexpected ways, waiting for those with the patience, skill, and passion to reveal them. The tale of Miguel Aguirre Soto, the 43rd Brigade, and the betrayal at Fuendetodos now takes its place in the complex narrative of the Spanish Civil War, a conflict whose repercussions continue to be felt in Spain and around the world. It is a story of courage and treachery, of warnings unheeded and truth long delayed, of a single gesture captured in a moment of time that would eventually, decades later, reveal its meaning and change our understanding of history. Leave a comment with your theory about what happened to Miguel after the ambush. Did he perish with his comrades in that ravine? Was he the mysterious wounded soldier who passed from this life in the hospital? Or did he somehow survive to live out his days in exile, carrying the weight of his failure to save the men whose faces look out at us from that faded photograph, frozen forever in the moment, just before tragedy struck? As we look at their faces now, knowing what awaited them, we can almost hear their silent voices across the decades, telling us their story, reminding us that history is not just about grand movements and famous figures, but about individual lives, caught in the machinery of events beyond their control, yet still capable of extraordinary courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The investigation continues, as all historical inquiries must, with new questions arising from each discovery. But thanks to the work of Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Ferreira, one truth is now certain. In October 1937, a young soldier named Miguel Aguirre Soto raised his hand in warning, a gesture that went unnoticed for 86 years. Now at last, we have seen it. Now at last, we understand.